Did you know that the two plagues in this chapter, which are locusts and darkness, were actually common occurrences in Egypt at the time? In fact, all of the plagues actually happened commonly in Egypt, right? Like frogs, gnats, hailstorms, even the Nile turning to blood. All of these things were common occurrences. Did we just explain away God? My name is Jacob Hubbard, and this is Freedom Chapter 10, brought to you by Incarnate Ministries out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Pilot Point, Texas. Again, we're joining you guys here from St. Paul's and Richardson. I think it'll probably be one of the last shoots here, but it's been really wonderful being here. Just a great community here. So today we're looking at two plagues that happened, and we're going to be reflecting more broadly on faith and reason in general. So I think that in the Catholic sphere and in just the world in general, we have this whole notion right now that faith and reason are opposed, and that, in fact, God can be explained away by science, and that if we have science, we don't need faith. And I think that's actually like a premature understanding, and perhaps incorrect understanding of how faith and reason are meant to coexist and how to really be. And so to further understand this, we're going to need to go back into history. We just need to look at the Catholic Church's history and realize that the whole time of the Church, they were the ones that actually were preserving all of the good works of the past. It was in monasteries before the printing press, right? So monks were the ones that copied down all of the famous works of old, philosophical, theological, whatever it was, Bibles. They were the ones that were copying it down. So faith and reason were actually really united back then. But then the printing press came, and then science was able to be opened up to the general public and happen outside of the realm of the church. And actually, another really big development was when Nicholas Copernicus, who himself was a Catholic, he discovered that the solar system was not geocentric, as the people thought, but heliocentric. And the church condemned him as a heretic, when in reality we all know that the solar system is heliocentric, right, centered around the sun. And basically what happened there is that questioning, that the church had made this whole theology based on the world being geocentric, like everything being centered around us, right? And then when that was turned upside down, people really started to question everything. Cue Descartes, for people who know philosophy. Cue Hume, cue all of this questioning of reason, of faith, and trying to replace it with science. And people began to believe that science could actually take the place of what religion promised, right? Eternal life, happiness, well-being forever. These sorts of things that religion promised to the common man, they believed that eventually medicine and continual progress in the scientific field could bring. And I argue that that kind of came to an end with the world wars. We saw what happened when science really actually is allowed to take over and be used by man. And it wasn't life-giving, it was corruption, it was death. And so now a lot of us, I think, are just kind of settled and say like, okay, whatever science can prove scientifically, we agree with, but anything outside of that we can't even question because we don't have the tools or means to understand. And I think by believing that, we're actually selling ourselves short. Because if we think about science itself, what are all of its principles based on? Assumptions, guesses, faith in some sort, right? Like any scientific principle we have, we observe in the world. So we have to initially trust our senses, that our sense experience is actually valid in order for science to actually begin. So science itself cannot be if not for faith. There's an inkling of faith, perhaps not like the fullness of a Catholic faith in a God, but the beginning of a faith in science, in that trust in our senses and in the world around us as being lawful, as being oriented toward like being able to be understood and diagnosed and universal things existing. So without faith, there cannot be science. And we can actually extrapolate that even more and see that faith actually puts science in its place, and in doing so, sets it free. Because if we just rely on science, then we're going to be left with a bunch of conclusions that don't actually have any explanation. And for those who really question it, we're going to be left with things that we don't even know for certain. But we are meant to live in certitude. We are meant to live in a world where, when there's a car coming and it's going to hit us, we step out of the way of the car because we don't question that the car doesn't exist, right? Like in our natural experience, we live by faith and reason, not just reason alone. There's no way for us to live by reason alone. And so it's really important for us to understand that reason itself is only supplemented by faith, and it also ends in faith. So we need faith to begin to act in reason, and then reason can only bring us so far, and that's when faith comes and kind of contextualizes it in its place. And this is why St. Anselm has this famous quote that says, faith seeking understanding. So how does this combination work practically? So basically what we need to do is we need to assent faithfully to what the Lord teaches us, right? Like that man is made for infinite, it's made for God. And then we can use science to help explain and show how that works. And we can use science as a principle through which we understand God. We understand that God created all things and that all things are good and ordered. And so we can use science to understand the order of things and how principles like gravity work and how different animals function and things like that. And that can actually bring about a contemplation of God and bring us closer to him rather than dividing us from him. So faith and science are meant to work coinciding, like together in union to bring us both to contemplation and eventually encounter with God. And that's the essence of faith and science working together. So here in Exodus chapter 10, we see plagues, and we've seen plagues this whole time. And while they have natural causes, yes, and so does the world, like we can trace back natural causes for the world, that doesn't explain away a supernatural cause. The two are not opposed in that sort of way. The supernatural, as we talked about before, actually works through the natural, like the burning bush, right? And it's the same way here, that God, even if there are natural explanations for these things, and he wants us to know that because he wants us to be reasoned and to understand the world around us and to have that bring us closer to him, he can still work through the natural to bring about supernatural glory, grace, and manifestations. And fundamentally, guys, we are made for something supernatural, not natural. And we should never sell ourselves short of that. We're made for God himself, and that is supernatural. And so to think that we can get there by reason or science alone is wrong. We need both faith and science to get there. Pope St. John Paul II has this amazing quote. It says, "Faith and reason are two wings by which the human person ascends to contemplation of the divine." And it's based on this whole philosophical story from Plato. We won't go into that. But it's really important that we have both, right? Because if we just have reason, then we're just going to be led continually into doubt and actually not make any progress. And if we have faith, well then we're not just faith. Well then we're not going to really be living in the real world. And like when we come up against reasonable arguments or doubt in our faith, it's going to overwhelm us. So we need both to ascend to contemplation of the divine. So today I just invite you guys to spend some time and think about which direction you lean. Are you more in the reason side? Are you more in the faith side? And try to ask the Lord for the grace to be centered, so that you can be living out of both faith and reason. And maybe just ask him to reveal simple ways and by which you can continue to just grow in that other wing, to develop that wing, right? So if it's faith, spend some time just repeating a simple prayer of surrender to the Lord, or maybe just repeating the Nicene Creed to yourself, or something like that, or truths from the Bible, so that you can continue to fully more understand them more. Or if you need reason, then just maybe start reading great works of the past, or just talking to your parish priest, or asking for arguments for the existence of God, and really just trying to build up a wealth of knowledge. So either way, there's something that we can do to help us grow and be more centered and help us to arise further and further to contemplation and encounter with God. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.